This is Andrew Wicklund from Project Risk Consultants. We're in step 4 of the risk process, and we're going to go over the templated quick risk. So we've gone through a few of these uncertainty steps in our fourth step. The one we really recommend is the templated quick risk. It's under the risk menu. It's about halfway down, a little less than halfway down, templated quick risk. We often refer to this as our uncertainty or our productivity register. Now, the theory behind what we're going to do here is create groupings of risk. The larger your project schedule is, the harder it is to go line by line. So when someone tells you, well, I went line through a 2,000 activity schedule, it's very hard to put faith that due diligence was done, that multiple people were interviewed, and that this was done in a timely process that makes sense at all. It's very, very difficult. I mean, the time invested is quite intense, and every time you update your schedule, you would have to redo all those values. So what we're trying to do is, we don't want to destroy the detailed logic in the schedule. We want to capitalize on that. We need that to be able to link in our risk register and our risk events. So we don't want a summary schedule, but we want to look at risk from more of a summary level. So we want to come up with groupings that are inherently correlated. So when we start thinking about this, one example would be, hey, we want to group things by discipline. We track productivity factors by discipline, and we have an activity code for discipline. It makes sense to our team if we make groupings by discipline. That way we can go in, we can look at our welders, our electrical and instrumentation, whatever the case may be. We track productivity factors and productivity ranges. We can apply that to the schedule based on our previous jobs, and it's a very justifiable answer, and that can be applied to our base schedule. The other thing, it doesn't have to be necessarily something percentage based. If I can make a grouping and say, well, we've got a set of concrete activities for the next 30 days. Everything's going to end up being percentages, but we might take the durations and convert them to percentages. We want to really speak to the project team. We don't want them thinking about risk. We want to get inputs from the project team. We want to understand, if you're on the project team or not, how do they look at the job? Because that's how the templates need to be built. We track things a certain way. We make the risk templates a certain way. So I'm going to give an example of this. We're going to click on this drop-down field for field right here. Summary task, we've got advanced filter, and then we've got all of the activity codes that would come from Microsoft Project, Primavera P3 or P6. So right now I'm going to look, and I'll do one for risk level. This was an activity code, and I've got high, medium, or low. Maybe I've broken things out by high, medium, or low risk levels. That's sometimes done. I can look at our summary task and say, you know what, this is an engineering, procurement, construction schedule. I'm going to break things out by engineering, procurement, and construction. Now, it's normally not as easy as breaking things out and oh, there it is, engineering, procurement, construction. Because the key would be, are there different, like construction, are there different disciplines? Is everything in construction the exact same range of uncertainty? You're trying to break it down in such a way that the groups you make really are inherently correlated. And whether you're looking at durations and then converting them to percentages, or whether you're looking at productivity factors and applying those, you can make some sense to this. We want to get full traceability into the answer. Monte Carlo results are thrown away all the time or considered garbage because nobody, it's like in high school, a math teacher will say, if you show me the answer without showing your work, the answer is wrong. Anybody can put an answer down. Show me how you got the answer. I want you to prove that the answer is correct. That's what we want to do here. And if you go line by line through thousands of activities, beyond the fact that people don't believe that it was done thoroughly, beyond that, it's so difficult to show traceability and show how the inputs were gathered, what the inputs were. It's like, we went line through line, take our word for it, it's right. We really want to get to where people look at this and say, hey, maybe this isn't 100% perfect. Maybe they didn't spend 5 years doing this analysis, but they turned it around quickly and they gave us a good picture of reality. That's what a risk analysis is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a good picture of reality. It's like looking at Michelangelo doing the Sistine Chapel. You don't have years to do this. You've got to do this quick. So, it's more like the television guy who paints pictures on TV. He's got to do it in a short period of time because we don't have 5 years. So, when we scroll through this, say for example, even with these three simple groups, it at least will illustrate the concept. Engineering. I talked to the team, the engineering team. They said, engineering was scheduled fairly aggressively. It's common on our projects that we have slip outs on engineering of up to 20% the way we schedule things. We could hit those dates. We do think they're maybe slightly aggressive. Maybe we'll put an extra 5% on the likely. The minimum, maybe it was scheduled at the minimum. And the maximum, yeah, it could push out 20%. So that 100 days could push out into 120. I can justify that input, and I can pull that from people. I don't need them to know about statistics or how I'm doing risk analysis. I want you tell me what the schedule looks like. I want everyone's input, and I want us to buy into the fact that we're loading this in for a reason. Same thing, we go to procurement and say, well, it's random vendors. Everything is, plus or minus 10%. Maybe we'll look at a couple long lead items offline, but for the most part, our process is okay. We're not going to have too much deviation from what we've scheduled in. Construction, we're up front in the process, so we haven't gotten all the contractors on board. We don't have the detailed construction schedules. Maybe we put this as a worst case. So, there's no way we'll go past our values that we put in. Maybe I've got some optimistic ranges there. What's nice about doing this is if you ever have in a Monte Carlo analysis, the answers are always wrong. Not that they're truly wrong, just people don't like the answer, whether it's bad news or what have you. If you can show someone the inputs and say the answer's never wrong, but sometimes the inputs are wrong. We've got two inputs, our risk inputs and our schedule. Either our schedule is flawed, our risk inputs are flawed, or the answer is right. Let's look through these inputs and see where our flaws are. Let's review them. If you go line by line through 2,000 activities, there's no way you can review and find the bugs in that. Whereas when you're doing this, even though it's a higher level, I can go through and say, wait a minute, those construction activities, we didn't really put those at worst case. We think those are the likely cases. Why did you put so much optimism on them? And we can get that dialogue going in that discussion. Now, we do have a correlation field. Correlation is very important to a Monte Carlo analysis for various reasons, especially when you're doing a detailed schedule. Sometimes people look at a detailed schedule and say, well, we have to use a summary schedule. There's so many reasons you can't do it on a detailed schedule. And it can be done. The key is coming up with a process that makes the data actually calculate correctly. And it is the bigger the schedule, the more difficult that is. Correlation is a part of this. What we generally like to do is come up with correlation groupings. Say, for example, a correlated grouping of work. And this is simply typing in a number. This is between 1 and 100, 1 and 100, or 0 and 100. If I put in 100% correlation, I've got 7 engineering activities in this group. In one simulation, when one activity hit 120%, all 7 would hit 120% of their duration. And it would do that because, hey, they're working to a productivity factor. If they're running 20% behind, it's on all of their activities. If you don't do that, basically half of the activities will be skewed towards the minimum, half towards the maximum, and you're going to get a lot towards the likely, and your curve will start pushing towards the mean. You're going to get a cancellation effect. Now, you don't want to correlate when it shouldn't be correlated either. So if you said, well, procurement, we have 3 activities. They're all 3 different vendors. One guy could be early, the other guy could be late. One guy could deliver a week early while the other guy's a week late. They aren't correlated. What one guy does is not correlated to the other guy. But if we have welders, they have 100 activities. And if they're late on one, typically their productivity factor is going to extrapolate. Now we're looking at a correlation grouping. So Correlation is very important. We'll do more modules on those, but that's what that field is. And we have some rules of thumb in terms of you've got schools of thought where there has to be a correlation matrix and all sorts of different things. At the end of the day, there's kind of ranges where it's either highly correlated or it's not. Correlation is important, but it's very difficult sometimes, even when you come through a statistical reason behind it. They're easy to break down why, you know, a 75% and an 85%, either one is equally justifiable. So I think people get really in the weeds and really start looking, oh, it has to be calculated a certain way. You know, 100% correlation is going to completely hit the same point of the triangle. 0% correlation is complete randomness. You know, when you're 80 to 100% though, you're still very heavily correlated. If you're 60 to 80, a little less so. Once you start getting down below that, it's a weaker and weaker correlation. Down below 40%, you're getting very little effect. So, you know, you can go through all sorts of statistical models. Sometimes I think you're spending more time and more man hours and maybe getting charged extra than if you just said, we're just trying to overcome some statistical anomalies. It's either highly correlated or it's not. So it's another conversation for another module. So the other thing I can do is set up an advanced filter. So I could do this on, and I can set up any grouping I want to. So I'm going to do a new filter, and I can do this by anything. I can say if the ID starts with something and the group code equals something, it's going to give me a value. That way, if I said, well, discipline isn't good enough, we really need to do this by area and discipline, or subcontractor and, you know, whatever the case may be. That way, if you said discipline's not a low enough level of granularity, I need to get a little bit more specific with this risk grouping. I can do an advanced filter. So I'll go ahead and click cancel on this. There are so many ways to do this. To me, these training modules are great for people to learn the mechanics of the software. This isn't very difficult to use. It's a cross between a quick risk and filters. You can click to save once you've got it how you want it and load in the bottom left hand corner. You apply the values here. You can apply the template and it applies everything. So as soon as I click apply, it says the template's applied to 15 tasks. I can save and exit. And notice my values have been filled in based on my groupings of risk. So my 7 engineering activities have been filled in. It isn't hard to use. The mechanics are very easy. But this is where oftentimes on a project people really could benefit from a consultant coming in and saying, hey, is this a good strategy? Can we make this justifiable? How can we make this a quick and repeatable process? Because I guarantee going line by line through thousands of activities will never be quick. It will never be repeatable. And if you don't get the answer you want, you're going to fudge the data. It happens in almost every analysis. Oh, we didn't get the answer we wanted after spending all that time. Let's throw everything away and we'll fudge the data. And it really is a shame that Monte Carlo has gotten such a bad name in schedule risk analysis because of issues like that. So it's important to understand the schedule, it's important to understand statistics, and it's important to come up with a quick, repeatable, well thought out strategy. So if I can turn 1,000 activities into 35 groupings of risk, I can get input and buy-in from everybody in a 4-hour session. So that's what we're trying to do, is minimize the time invested from the team, get everyone to understand and buy into what's going in the system, and then go from there. So this is a very simple example of what we would do, but at least it starts to get you in the process and in the mindset of what we're trying to accomplish.